There we go. Okay, thank you guys for being on, and I do expect there to be a few others. This webinar is really for some of you who are some of our core folks, and it's a chance for me to a certain extent, test out talking a little bit about this campaign and get a little bit of feedback from you about it as well. So we're recording this because I think there's a few folks who registered so that they could watch the recording and learn a little bit more about it. So I'm going to go ahead and jump on in. So what we're here to talk about today is a new campaign that Iowa Campus Compact is launching called Giving Voice to the Civic Mission of Higher Education. I'm going to skip some of these slides about us for you all, but they're in here for when we're sharing this mission with other folks on your campuses, including communications folks, which is one of our next steps that I'm going to talk about. But where this campaign really comes from is our last strategic planning process. Everyone who participated in that, one of the common themes that came out was a need to really increase attention to the value of the civic mission of higher education. Feeling like a lot of the conversation about higher education is about the private good, just about the need to prepare students for their first job, and looking at that in a very limited way. And we're really wanting to educate people about why the civic mission is important and should matter to them. So when I talk about the civic mission, what I mean is educating students for active citizenship and engaging students, faculty, and others on campus in strengthening communities. So a lot of things that we do with community engagement and focus on in our organization. And what we want to do with this strategy is really bring all of our member campuses together to tell this story in a way that's more coordinated and connected and builds into a larger story that makes sense to people. So a couple reasons why we think telling the story is important. So after the strategic plan was launched, we formed a committee to work on this strategy, and we've really spent a lot of time thinking about how do we take that broad goal of giving voice to the civic mission and increasing public awareness and really bring that down to some core messages, which is some core audiences. And so we've done some research just looking at what are current opinions right now about college, about the reason to go to college. And so one of the things that we found is a lot of data and information and surveys on parents that really focuses on parents being very concerned about students getting that first job out of college, and I think rightfully so. But that means that some things like being more well-rounded and thinking critically and learning more about the world seem to take a back seat. And so we've identified parents as one of the audiences that we most need to connect with and help them see the value of the civic mission and community engagement. And I'll talk a little bit about what that message is as well. So another reason to talk about the civic mission is just the gap that we have in our country in people being involved in our democracy. So a few facts about that in terms of our voter participation, people contacting their elected officials, and I think we can all point to things in the more recent political cycles that really tell us we have some issues in our democracy and we need more people to be involved in different ways. And for them to do that, we need them to be able to think critically about social issues, communicate and work across difference, and really be able to apply what students are learning in college to community issues. So another reason is that when we talk about what employers are looking for, they really are emphasizing some of those same skills that I just talked about. So while there's that emphasis on the private good and preparing students for their jobs, sometimes that's taken to mean that we need to be giving students these very specific job skills, like knowing how to specifically be an engineer or specifically do computer coding or those kinds of things. But when what you find when you actually talk to employers is that they're looking for some different things. They're looking for more of these core skills, again, like critical thinking, problem solving, written and oral communications, applying knowledge in real-world settings. They want students to get experience solving problems, and those are the things that they're highly valuing. All of those things really brought us to a message that we thought would be compelling to the audiences that we've talked about. And it's that students really need to develop core skills for both civic and professional success. We don't have to choose between those. Saying that getting a job is important after college doesn't have to mean that we're losing some of these other important things that college is about. And also that community experiences can help build those skills and are really an important piece of the college experience from both a professional and civic lens. So what do we mean when we talk about that? So coming back to some of the skills that we talked about. So again, sometimes they're pitted against each other. We can educate students for their career success with these technical and professional skills, or we could educate them to be active citizens with these civic skills. And again, what we found is there's some key things that are at the heart of both of those issues, and we don't have to choose. So that's thinking about communication, working across difference, critical thinking, applying skills and knowledge, and all of these other things that we're really referring to as core skills that sometimes are referred to as soft skills, but we'd like to be a part of a movement to talk about that in a different way, because it's clear they are at the heart of what's most important about the college experience. So as I said, the next piece of this is that community engagement experiences have been found to build these core skills that we're looking for. So you study after study, you look at critical thinking. So community engagement results in complexity of understanding, problem analysis, critical thinking, results in communication. So being able to be better with interpersonal skills, leadership, those kinds of things, working across difference. So reducing stereotypes, having more cultural and racial understanding, working with people who are different than you to solve problems. And then, of course, giving students those real-world opportunities to apply what they're learning. So thinking about how community engagement can be very integrated with academic learning so that students are thinking critically about issues, engaging in problem solving around those issues, and then are really able to build the transferable skills and knowledge that they'll need both for their career and their civic involvement in the future. So we also want to paint a picture of what our end goal is here. What are the students we're trying to educate that can make an impact on the world? And we really see these people as being civic-minded professionals. So this is a term that's been coined in some other research around community engagement. And we're trying to use it to paint a picture and tell a story of the kind of person that we're trying to graduate and the goal we really have with the civic mission of higher education. So this is one of the visuals we've created to try to convey that message. So really the anatomy of a civic-minded professional. So again, this is the person who can use critical thinking, communication, empathy, passion, teamwork, and the ability to apply their knowledge, and can really use that to build the career and professional success that we know students are looking for and we know they're coming to college for, but also to be able to further fulfill their lives and make a difference in their communities and improve our democracy in the process. So that's more about the message and kind of what we've honed in on as something we think might be compelling, again, to some of the people who have the ability to impact higher education. So thinking about policy leaders, but also thinking about business leaders and employers, the kinds of people that students and parents are listening to when they think about where to go to college and how to spend their time in college. And then again, thinking about parents as well as students because of the influence that they have on the things that students are getting involved with in college. So part of our message is to our member campuses and the people at those member campuses, how can you get involved in spreading this message? And that's some of what I want to talk about today too and get some feedback on. So one of the things we want to encourage people to do is sharing their campus's unique story. So this can look a couple of different ways, and we're offering a few different platforms to do this in these different ways. So the first is thinking about stories of civic-minded professionals. So who are graduates, current students about to graduate, that kind of thing, that can really illustrate how community experiences can help people form into these well-rounded individuals that we're looking for who can have career success and make a difference in their communities. And we have a form on the website, and I'm going to show you the website in a minute, that allows you to share your story, upload a picture, and that way we can be spreading those stories more across the state. And again, packaging them all together in a way that really paints this larger picture. The other thing is really sharing more stories of specific community engagement courses, programs, and events and activities, but really focusing on the impact of those. And I'm going to talk in a minute about kind of reframing that. And then thinking about how to write pieces and speak and talk more about your institution's unique approach to community engagement in the civic mission. One of the things we don't want to do is paint the picture that this is being done the same across our member campuses. Everyone has very different approaches, very different things tied into their mission, reasons they're doing this, and ways they're going about it. And we want to highlight the beauty of all of those pieces together to paint this picture of how higher education in Iowa is really fulfilling the civic mission. So another way to do this is sharing stories. We do hope that our member campuses will be better connected to sharing those stories with us, so that, again, we can be taking stories from your blogs, from your news releases, reblogging them on our site, sharing them, and collecting them all together in a way that, again, creates this larger picture. But one of the things that we want to point out is ways of thinking about reframing these stories to make them more compelling and make them focus more on the critical nature of them. So one of the things we know is that parents in particular, students in some cases, and business leaders in some cases, see community engagement and community service and that kind of thing as something that's nice to do, but not necessarily critical and highly impactful. And I think some of that is because of the story we're telling right now. So if you look at the stories that are put out there about community engagement, they are often the feel-good story. You know, the story that says, look at these students who went out and did a campus cleanup, that says, oh, look at these great students who are mentoring young people. And those are great stories, and they will make you feel good, but feel good isn't necessarily compelling. And one of the things that we've learned in some research about communications is that you really have to take stories from being feel good to focusing on impact, to really being in a more problem and solution framework. People are compelled by things where they can really see there's a problem, right? There's a gap in civic skills, there's a gap in professional skills, and we have a solution, which is community engagement and the civic mission of higher education. So one example I just want to provide about that is around Dance Marathon. Some of you have Dance Marathon on your campuses. It's a great program where students can really run a student organization, raising sometimes millions of dollars for children's hospitals, and really gain a great experience. This year, there's been some wonderful examples of that, and so there's been some press releases that have gone out. Those have focused a lot on the community impact, the emphasis on the funds being raised. The student experience is framed as being important to the cause of fundraising for children's hospitals, but not necessarily important to their development. So while that tells an important story about the difference we're making in the community in some ways, it's not necessarily very compelling, and it doesn't get at why these types of experiences are critically important to college students and to their future success. So one of the things that I've done is think about reframing these stories, and I have an example of that that'll be up on the Giving Voice website, where I interviewed several students who have done Dance Marathon now, who did Dance Marathon and have graduated, and an advisor with Dance Marathon, so that we could focus on the community impact and the amount of funds raised, but that plus the critical student development that's happening. So some of the quotes that I found are here, and one of the greatest stories that I found from that really speaks to one of the things that's at the heart of our message, which is a student who did Dance Marathon at her institution. While she was there, the message from her mom constantly was that she was spending too much time doing Dance Marathon, that she should have been studying, that she should have been working for pay, that she should have been doing different things other than that. And she told me that her mom really didn't get the value of it until this student started applying for jobs. And her Dance Marathon experience was the main thing that she was talking about in those interviews and on her resume, and is the reason she believes that she got the job she did today. And then her mom said that she really understood in a different way, understood why that community experience was very critical to her college experience and how it's going to help her and helped her build skills moving forward. Making some comparisons to internships. So the advisor I talked to at one institution talked about how internships can be valuable, but with this particular community experience, students are really running the organization. They're making asks, they're running the meetings, they're doing things that are a lot more hands-on than what you're necessarily going to get in a typical internship experience. So it's not to say that internships are not valuable, but it's to say yes, internships are valuable, but so are all these other experiences, and trying to make that point, again, with those who have the most influence over higher education. So I wanted to move into then a few of the ways that we're thinking campuses can get involved, and we want to continue to build that out. So that's something I'm interested in feedback on. So I'll go through some of these, and then I want to show you the website and some of the things that we've created. So first is we'll have a template press release. In 2 weeks, we'll be officially announcing this campaign, and campuses can announce their role in it, that they want to talk about the civic mission, and we have a template for that. And then share the campaign with others on campus. Get them to share their stories about how they've built these civic and professional skills, how they are civic-minded professionals, and share other stories with us. So again, sharing those civic mission stories with us on social media, sharing those in a way that we can then be amplifying them through our website. And then those are some of the more institutional things, and we'll be to that end reaching out more to presidents, to leaders, and to communications officials to think about how institutions might engage. But we also want to create ways for people to engage as individuals, because we do think we have a lot of champions in faculty, staff, and current students who are very interested in making sure the civic mission of higher education remains an area of emphasis. So we're going to be inviting people to sign on as civic mission ambassadors. They'll be able to use talking points, and we'll regularly send updates with stories that you can, again, then amplify and share on social media. We'll have visuals and that kind of thing to make that more compelling. So we want to really give people a variety of ways to engage and to tell those stories. So before we move into kind of getting any questions you have, thoughts you have, that kind of thing, I wanted to just share some of the things that we'll be putting out here pretty soon as we launch the strategy next week more broadly with folks on campuses. So first, we've got a section on our website really devoted to this. So you can see where there's a little bit of an overview of the goal of this campaign. You can see some of the visuals. We'll have a section for the latest news and stories, and right now that just has the press release announcing it, or it will. I'm not sure why it's not populating at the moment, but that's the idea. The stories that we blog and reblog and the news releases we put out will populate there. We also have, as I mentioned, profiles of civic-minded professionals, and we want to continue to add to that, and those will be populating here. And we've already got several of those that, again, I'm not sure why they're not popping up at the moment, but should be, and we'll get that going as we continue to go live. Then we've also got here where you can share your story. So that's where I mentioned people can talk about how community experiences in college and beyond really helped prepare them for personal and professional development and success. So we've got a quick form where people can share that, share a picture, and then we'll have some more stories to tell on social media. And then if you scroll down at the bottom, we have different categories for different kinds of information. So we have a little more information available for our higher ed partners, some different ways to get involved. So we'll have another webinar that's more for communication staff and a broader audience on March 6th. We have a template press release, as I mentioned. We link back to where you can have people share their stories. And then you can see here we link to talking points about the civic mission. And I can share those with you guys as well. I need to change this link a little bit, but we have talking points here where you can look at some of the data and information that I've gone through on this webinar in terms of what the message is and where we've gotten that information. So you can see here that kind of goes through some of what we want to do, or what we're thinking about, some of what I went through in terms of the civic skills gap, the professional skills gap, and then how community engagement can build those things, and then what kind of we think students and employers are looking for and ways we can act together. And then we link to all of our sources of that information and that kind of thing as well, so that you can see that there. In addition to some of the other pieces. And then, as I mentioned, we have other pages. So just to kind of talk about some of the next steps, again, we've identified parents and business leaders as being two groups that have the ability to influence the direction of higher education and the choices that students make in terms of what they're engaging in and what they see as valuable. So we've got pages going for each of those, and we'll be continuing to populate those. For business leaders, based on some of our research, we're really seeing business leaders as people who can both benefit from the civic mission of higher education and be effective spokespeople for the civic mission of higher education, again, because the research is showing us that they believe in and understand the power of community experiences, and they're looking for the core skills that these experiences can build. So we think with a little bit of education, they can be helping deliver that message. We also plan to develop more resources to help businesses think about how they're evaluating community experiences in their hires. And on the flip side of that, helping students think about what are really quality community experiences, and then how do you describe those on a resume and in an interview and that kind of thing. We're also thinking about connecting with business leaders more about their employee volunteer programs, because we believe they have a lot of the same goals that we do with those community engagement experiences, but they haven't necessarily been a part of understanding the research about what really makes for quality community engagement experiences. So really seeing it as a continuum where students can get those kind of experiences in college and go on to continue to have those experiences in their employment, and how business leaders can really be using what we've learned about reflection and other ways of really connecting to professional development and learning outcomes in what they're doing. And then, as I mentioned, thinking about the parent audience as well. Oops. And we plan to build out that page a little bit more, and really also think with our member campuses about the ways in which you're communicating with parents, and how the value of these community experiences might be better explained through some of those communications. So thinking about things that we might be able to build that could be a part of communications with alumni, communications with prospective students, that kind of thing, that could really help them see the value that your institution is bringing to students through an emphasis on these types of experiences. So thinking about that, asking about it when you're looking at colleges. And then we also link to each of our member campuses, their community engagement activities, so that, again, people thinking about where to go to school can be thinking about what our member colleges are offering in those areas. So those are some of the things. I'll kind of go into a tiny bit of what we're kind of seeing as the next steps then, because really, this is just the launch of the campaign, trying to get everyone on the same page and thinking about how we can be working more together to tell a more coordinated story and really get that message out there. But we want to continue to develop resources for our member campuses. So thinking about conversations, again, that you're having with parents and students, and how we could help build this into more of those conversations. So an example might be a presentation I've been working on for students that's about how to do quality community engagement, but then also how to talk about it on your resume, how to talk about it in interviews. So really giving you presentation templates and other tools that you could be using to bring to those conversations that you're already having with students. Looking at, as I mentioned, more resources for business leaders so that we can more actively engage them in this strategy. And then as we move along, we'll be calling on campuses to share stories in specific areas. So like alternative breaks, which we've done in the past, but with a different framing. Something around graduation, where again, we're talking about the civic-minded graduates and professionals that we're trying to build, and we're telling that unique story of each campus, but in a way that connects into this bigger picture and is more compelling to people. And a question I have with that is just what you would like to see and what you would think would be helpful to your campus. So we'll get to that in a minute. So you can learn more, again, on the website there at iacampuskampact.org/givingvoice. And I can share this PowerPoint and, again, have shared the resources and the sources of the data and information that we're using in the talking points and in the message here. So I want to go ahead and stop the share, and I think I'll also stop the recording for now. And